and we have a walkthrough and conversation today with Faysal Altunbozar in conjunction with his solo presentation at Prairie, teaching a perv how to eat honeysuckle. First, Faysal will stream a video walkthrough of the exhibition, which includes footage from the Montrose Point Migratory Butterfly and Bird Sanctuary. And then we will open the conversation up for questions with the artist, along with Tim and Jack from Prairie. If you do have any questions, please write them into the chat, and Faysal will answer them after the video. So now I will hand it over, and the video will begin. Enjoy.
Hello everyone, I am Faysal Altunbozar. Today I'm going to show you my show at Prairie, teaching a perv how to eat honeysuckle. The exhibition has 4 main elements: fabric wall pieces, ceramic bird feeders, sound piece, and custom print caps. With these works, I am weaving a narrative around Chicago's bird sanctuaries and their layered history. 3 years ago, when I first moved to Chicago, I began visiting 2 migratory bird sanctuaries on the north side. The Montrose Point Bird and Butterfly Sanctuary, it is also known as the Magic Hedge, and the Bill Jarvis Migratory Bird Sanctuary. Both of these sites are really close to where I live, so my first visits were spontaneous. I was mostly seduced by the dense greenery of the sanctuaries, where your body doesn't have to be inside all the time. There's an obvious contrast with the rest of the Chicago's lakefront, where the landscape is mostly pedicured with occasional prairie areas. Both of these sites are very biodiverse. On my visits, I was mostly observing different plant, insect, and bird species. However, my encounters at these sites were not limited to the hundreds of modern human species. After locking eyes with a couple of men, it rapidly became apparent to me that these sites were actually cruising grounds. After discovering this fact, even though it is actually a very well-known fact within the queer community, I just didn't know it as a newcomer. My following visits had ulterior purposes. I found myself being part of both the cruising and the birding crowd. But I also sensed that my indeterminate presence confused other visitors. The bird watchers were kind of cautious of me, and the cruisers shied away from my camo t-shirts or like canvas backpacks. This actually didn't make me uncomfortable at all. Instead, I found this obscurity and versatility very liberating. My curiosity rapidly increased, and I started researching the development of these areas. The history of Montrose Point's current incarnation begins in the 1950s, when it was strategically chosen by the United States Army for a short-range anti-aircraft missile installation during the Cold War era. These missile systems were called Nike Project, named after the Greek goddess of victory, Nike. So this military site was positioned in the middle of the city in anticipation of a speculative Soviet airstrike. The area was concealed by a security fence, which was in turn covered by a hedge of non-indigenous honeysuckle shrubs. The army abandoned the site in 1969, and the fence was removed, but the honeysuckles remained. They were retired from their duty as camouflage devices. After it was reclaimed as a public park in the 1970s, it became evident that the area was a hotspot for migratory birds. The honeysuckle bushes and trees are an attractive stopover for birds on their long and difficult journeys. And at the Montrose Point, the birds rest on branches, feed on berries or insects, and take flight to continue their 1,000-mile migratory routes. In the 1990s, the city wanted to restore Montrose Point to a savanna, the ecosystem that flourished in the area prior to its development in the 19th century. The plan was met with skepticism by some, and it was embraced by others. Birders were concerned that removal of the shrubbery and trees would scare migratory birds, while preservationists and scientists were concerned about population declines of indigenous plants and animals. So at the end, City conducted a participatory design process involving scientists, bird watchers, beachgoers, residents, and urban planners. The city managed to both preserve the hedge and create a healthy habitat for native species. Since the site provides a degree of privacy in the public sphere, it is frequently utilized as cruising grounds for gay men. The cruisers were not consulted as patrons of the park, rather they were branded as criminal intruders. They were subjected to frequent police raids and arrests in an effort to make the park safer for everyone else. The scare tactics actually failed. Even after the site was publicly exposed in the press or the access to some dance bars rented by rope fences, it still remained as an active cruising ground. Even though they have shared the same territory for decades, there is still a tension between the bird watchers and the cruisers. The birders who visit the sanctuary try to distinguish themselves from the cruisers with visual signs. For instance, on online forums, they advise each other to differentiate themselves by wearing obvious birding gears like bucket hats, binoculars, even though they're functional also, and like patches on coats. Cruisers use similar tactics, creating and reading nonverbal codes of objects and body language. This is also very similar to observing the feather color, neck length, or call patterns of a bird to identify its species. These findings and observations inspired me to work on a new series of objects. In my studio, I started to play with the forms, materials, and visuals I encountered at the bird sanctuary. I wanted to create a hybrid language that could signal multiple meanings and invoke different desires. So the objects in the exhibition suggest function, but they are not strictly instructional. They relate to and interact with both human and more than human bodies. There are moments of concealment and hypervisibility, recognition and confusion, seduction and repulsion. Just like messages carved on tree trunks by human hands, their legibility changes with perspective, knowledge, desire, time, and the intervention of other species. The fabric wall works have photographic prints on them. These are my photographs from the site. Last year, I started documenting the tree carvings, and on each visit, I noticed slight changes on these writings. They were almost alive. Some of them are more legible compared to others, and they are in multiple languages. But the majority of the names are Hispanic names. Physical form of cruising is actually a dying sport. The geolocation dating applications are the preferred method to meet with someone new. However, all the communication on the online media is mostly based on text, and language sometimes might set a barrier. In the sanctuary, you don't need to talk. In fact, you shouldn't actually talk. You should refrain from talking. Both for bird watching and cruising, you might scare off the rare species or the hunk on the corner. So the site not only attract bird migrants but also human migrants too. I embedded these photographs in fabric sculptures. The series is called Chicago Years, and each work has a subtitle. I borrowed these words from bird watching slang in English. For instance, the image with the multiple carvings on it is titled Patagonia Picnic Table Effect. This is a term used when a birder finds a rare bird and while looking at that direction discovers a couple other rare species swarmed in that direction. For the sound piece, I collaborated with Eduardo Rosario. He's a Chicago-based sound artist. And when I first proposed the project to him, I had some sound recordings from the site. We actually didn't want to create a simulation with these. The soundscape of the site is ever-changing depending on the time of the day and the season. We were more focused on the emotional experience of being a cruiser, birder, or a bird in this sanctuary. The sound is 40 minutes long, and it has different moments that invoke danger, tranquility, peace, or arousal. It is also hard to distinguish the source materials. The sound can be a wing flapping of a bird or a wet towel whipping someone's skin. We are also thinking about the circular choreography of cruising and birding. It was really interesting to collaborate with him because our discussions were mostly about concept and feeling. Then hearing those abstract concepts translated into sound was very satisfying. The big ceramic bird feeder, it is titled Fruitless Pollination, a Joyful Feast. It stores sweet nectar in its body and squeezes out to feed flying pollinators. It is also hung high enough, so there is nothing actually preventing you from going underneath and harvesting some nectar with your tongue as well. Orange straps are for attracting the attention of hummingbirds, and the form and materials give references to the layered disruptive side. Other smaller feeders have a similar story. I am also repurposing some objects like bird bands to tether a plant on these tubular forms. I'm repeating this gesture on the custom caps as well. I replaced the generic camel print with a honeysuckle pattern. Instead of a bucket head, I'm using a baseball cap, and when you look close enough, you'll see some like surprising moments behind the bushes. These caps also worn by the gallery staff during the open house. The exhibition is mostly motivated by unexpected encounters of species, races, genders, sexualities, and social classes in these bird sanctuaries. When Prairie invited me to do a solo show, it was early March. A lot has changed since then. My access to these sites was cut off for months, and when I finally got to visit again, I noticed a few changes. With the other public places being shut down, like the saunas or the clubs, these sites, the cruising sites, started to get more visitors. This was also an important discovery for me because I refrain from nostalgia, and it is not my purpose to do an autopsy on these sites. So with this exhibition, I try to think about conviviality, co-evolution, and hybridity instead of documenting a historic reality. Thanks everybody for joining in. The last day to see the show in person is tomorrow. The gallery is gonna be open 1 to 4. Please come if you're in Chicago. And if you have any questions, stick around for the Q&A, and thank you for watching again.
All right.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
We're here. Tim, you should turn your video on.
I don't have the option.
Oh, interesting.
Max has to do it for me.
Well, so Faysal is here.
Yes. Oh,
We're
here.
blessed by your presence. My name is Jack Schneider, and I am a co-director of Prairie, along with Tim Mann, who's with us as well. Or was with us a second ago at the video. Just
okay, he's here.
So we have, we'll start off with a couple questions that we have for you, Faysal. And anybody who's watching, if you have questions, you can feel free to leave them in the chat. And then Tim and I will ask Faysal on your behalf.
Yeah.
So do you want to start, Tim, or should I?
I'll start.
Okay.
So Faysal, I know you went to SAIC and you were in the design department. And
yes.
And that shows quite a bit in the exhibition because not only is everything formally beautiful, it also serves a function. And some of the pieces have more obvious functions than other pieces. So I was wondering if you could tell us about the functions of the works, as well as how your design background maybe influences how you make decisions as an artist.
So as you said, my background is in design, and in my art practice, I also still think about built environment and objects and how our bodies like in relationship with those. For this show, when I was like looking at as I said in the video, when I was like looking at the objects people were wearing in the bird sanctuary, so like my initial ideas were around actually architecture, and then it became more like object scaled things. And when I started like working on these objects, they actually didn't have like a specific function in the beginning, especially the fabric pieces. And I was like borrowing like the materials and the forms from the objects that I have seen. And then I started to realize like they started to like, for instance, like the works actually were in smaller scale, the wall pieces. Then I decided to make them bigger. And then after seeing them in that scale, they started to feel like some of them looks like backpacks or like sleeping bags or like camping gear. And I am trying to refrain from like giving a specific function to them. So for the feeders, like it started from a function because like I was actually like I was intending to like create a feeder, bird feeder. But then even with them, like the tubular ones, the one with the print on it, it is a bird feeder, and like the other one I'm using as a vase. So they can have like multiple functions as well. And the forms, when I was like working on those feeders, I was also thinking about the militaristic history of this site, and especially like when I was like looking at the old footage of the site, and like I was reading about the Nike missile project, and like those like tubular forms like kind of like erecting to sky, and it kind of like started from that. And the dripping bird feeder actually, so I was reading about these hummingbird feeders. People actually don't want them to drip. It's a problem when they drip on the floor. And I was like thinking, what if it was the way of feeding? Because that way, like other like species like humans can also like drink nectar from that too. So it's kind of a speculative feeder. I actually really want to see if it is like 100% functional. Maybe I can like show it in like open air sometime. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your questions. And also for the wall pieces, I was also thinking about like the function of the trees and the shrubberies, because like you use them as a hiding spot. So these like fabric pieces are also like almost like in body length, so you can hide behind them as well. Yeah, those were my thoughts around the object.
Yeah,
I
think
answered my question.
The first piece that we sort of talked to you about when we had our studio visit were these hats that you created with the camouflage print that you designed. And I think, as you were just saying, like camouflage in general kind of like figures throughout the exhibition, you know, with the kind of foresty color choices and materials. And I think really, oh, there's a hat. Thank you, Tim. And like, right, all these kind of camouflage references allude to a desire to kind of hide in place. But then interestingly, you kind of foil this in other parts of the exhibition where you bring in these bright flashes of color, like the high-vis orange straps, for example, which to me, the functionality of that is really to kind of like loudly announce your presence. So kind of the opposite of camouflaging yourself in an environment. So I'm wondering, like, does this kind of like push and pull between hiding and high visibility? How does that relate to how you feel or how you try to like be while you're in the bird sanctuaries?
Actually, this is really interesting because like this theme, it's been in my like work for the last 2 years, the visibility and invisibility and like concealment, because I think like it starts from like even in the identity politics, always like talk about the visibility and inclusion. but also there is a risk to visibility. It is sometimes a trap. So I am kind of like discovering that like the potential of also concealment, because like that is also, we always see concealment as something negative or like something that is related to fear. But it can be actually like something positive as well. It can be seen as something positive and a strategy. Like for instance, for these cruising sites, actually exposing them is a problem, because like when they're exposed, they're like no longer functional. And it is better to keep them as secret. But also there is a like certain degree of visibility as well, because like if not so many people know about these places, they are gonna die, because like people are not gonna go there for cruising. So there is like a balance between those two, I think. And when you're in the space also, it depends on your like intention. If you want to be seen, you like change your body language to like to indicate that you want to be seen. Or maybe you don't want to be seen and you don't want to interact with anyone else, so then you just like keep quiet or like don't look at anyone else. And you just like sort of like kind of blend in the environment. So yeah, I think it is more a conceptual like perspective, and also like a functional one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering too, we heard throughout the video the sound work that you created in collaboration with Eduardo Rosario.
Yes.
That was playing during the tour, and the gallery plays ambiently throughout the space. I'm wondering, and you talked about it a little bit in the tour, but I'm wondering like what was the process like working with Eduardo? Like where do these sounds actually come from? Like, are they sampled or yeah.
Yeah, they are. So when I first proposed the project, I actually had some recordings, and we started working on those recordings, and we actually didn't like the first couple of tries, because like it felt like simulation. And so, and also it was kind of like obvious where the voice was coming from. So we kind of like didn't want that to happen. And then Eduardo sampled some of the sounds. So like that sound with the like, it almost sounds like a bug walking. It is like twigs breaking. And then like there are those like wing flapping sounds. Those also sound like kind of like a wet towel, like whipping a skin. So like within the audio, we kind of like wanted to create those moments of like ambiguity. Because like you can actually go to the like the sanctuary itself and like the experience the real soundscape, but we were more like interested actually how yeah, does it feel to be there, like within your body. Yeah, and that was the process. And then like we had like weekly meetings, and yeah, and also you can like clearly hear his aesthetic as well within the like the audio. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, we love, it's such a beautiful piece. I'm wondering, so in the piece you were speaking about your kind of like indeterminate presence at the bird sanctuary confusing other visitors, and maybe that kind of being intentional to a certain degree, whereas other people, as you were saying, like the bird watchers are in some cases like really kind of like loudly showing their identity and their purpose for being there with their dress, for example, bucket hats, patches. I'm wondering like what is a strange or funny encounter you've had with somebody at the bird sanctuary?
Oh, let me think. It always happens because no one actually knows, especially after I started working on this exhibition. I go there with my like camera and like my, I don't know, like recording gears and stuff. So it gives the impression of that, like, oh, I'm there to observe birds, or like I'm doing a documentary or something. But when I actually like want to flirt with someone, they get really confused. And like this person the other day like texted me on like Grindr. I was also like online on Grindr, and they were like, oh, I saw you, I think you were like drawing the birds, but like, are you here for... That was a funny one. And also there was another one that I approached to someone like kind of like mimicking a bird vessel. And I was like mostly interested in like, oh, how he was like doing that. And then he misunderstood me. And he thought I was like flirting with him. And I think he was also kind of like, he was like one of those like people like me, like there for like no strict, like he didn't have a strict purpose. So that was a kind of a funny one as well. But yeah, I also like, I try to be like cautious about like in the video there are no like faces or like also human presence, because like anonymity is important like in that site. And the only reason, like this was kind of a dilemma for me as well, like when I started working on the project, like, oh, should I work on it or not? But this site is already like highly exposed, so I didn't feel bad about kind of like talking about it.
Right. And I wonder too, I mean it makes me think, you mentioned in the piece as well how the existence of this place was because like the continued existence of it was sort of part of this like city planning process, right?
Yes.
Where, and it was a kind of like participatory design sort of style or methodology of putting it together, where all, you know, the constituents of that place were consulted, the neighbors, the bird watchers, what have you. And it makes me think like, what would it look like, if any different at all, if cruisers were consulted in that process? I mean,
You'd almost think it would be more trees.
More trees?
What?
Yeah.
More trees, yeah. This is something that I also think about, and this kind of like reminds me of a piece by Elmgreen and Drexet. They had a piece called Cruising Pavilion, and it was actually shown in a park, and then the park committee wanted to remove it like after the first like couple of weeks, I think, because like they got like a lot of complaints. And it was specifically designed for cruising. It had like white walls. It also kind of looked like a gallery space anyway. And then they wanted to remove it because like they thought the park is for everyone. And to like, then it has to be safe for everyone. But in fact, like they also mentioned that like when the community actually were like using the cruising pavilion, they were also like cleaning it. They were also like taking care of it. So, but like they, at the end, they removed the pavilion. So even though like people use the park for like different purposes, there are like certain activities that you're allowed to do. And that's also, I was also reading recently about Moss architecture from Chicago as well. They had a proposal for this site, and they have these like bird watching towers, and they kind of look silly to me because like actually people don't watch birds there from a height, and then like it doesn't actually serve a purpose. And it felt like like when architects or designers, when they intend to design something for these kind of sites, they actually sometimes don't do the job of like seeing like how people are actually using these sites, and also including every aspect of it. And And one of the interesting thing about this process also, like the participatory design process, like the because of the site is like unpedicured, like new like the ancient species started to revive, which was kind of like why it is called magic hedge, because like it's kind of magical. And like actually like from a design and like ecology perspective, honeysuckle actually shouldn't live in Chicago because like it is so cold, and people actually expected it to die, but it didn't die. And that was like also one of the reasons it is called magic hedge. And now there are these baby dunes. They appeared, I think, like in like around like 2005, 10. And these like dune environments are very fragile. And it was also a surprise that these dunes appeared like on the coast, because like there are no dunes like on the Chicago coast. Yeah, and now it's a nesting site for piping plovers and like other species.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
it's good to hear. I'm wondering, I don't even really have a question in this. Maybe it will become a question as I say it, but I wanted to share a couple of my favorite descriptions of the show that people have DM'd me or said in person. One was that it is Sylvan amateur softcore, and the other is sexy REI.
Yeah.
To describe the aesthetic. Would you say that's accurate?
They are accurate. I also saw one, like someone shared a photograph of the big like feeder, the dripping feeder, and there was a comment saying that I don't know what that is, but it looks erotic.
Not wrong.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of, I mean, you know, people have the other bird feeders kind of are a visual double entendre in a sense. We've got glory holes in the exhibition.
Yeah. Everything.
But the one thing that I haven't done yet, which I need to do tomorrow because it's the last day of the show, is taste some of that nectar.
Yes, you should. Okay, I will. Yeah, I should bring some. And yeah, also like when I was working on the show, like these materials are also new to me. Like I didn't work with like duck canvas or like straps before. So there was a process of learning it, and how I learned was because it was the pandemic. Like the pandemic was still here, and it's still here. And I was at home, and I was like trying to learn how to sew these like materials, or like how to wax canvas, because like the canvas that I use it's wax. And I also discovered that these materials are highly gendered. Because like when I try to learn like sewing, all the sewing videos are like these like craft videos. They are like from these and when I am looking at these like sewing for like duck canvas or like the strap videos, they were all under the name of like sewing for men, because generally like hunters or like people who are into that sport do that. And it was a kind of a weird shift between the domestic type of sewing and then this type of sewing.
Right.
Yeah.
Our culture loves to unnecessarily gender things.
Yeah, unnecessarily gendered everything.
We have a question from Heather Hubbs. She's wondering where you got the nectar.
Oh, they are actually sold at Petco. They can buy like nectar from like pet stores, because like they are used in the hummingbird feeders and like the domestic ones. And actually you can also make your own nectar. Like there are recipes online. I tried like a couple of like times I made my own. Like it's just like sugar water basically, but like the red ones are not food coloring. they are actually like the natural color of the nectar. Yeah, and actually the hummingbirds are the only bird species that can taste sugar, and that's the only species.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and maybe like there are two more, but they're like only like bird pollinators. They're only hummingbirds.
Big thing.
You want to take it, Tim?
Sure. So, hiya Faysal. You speak to the history of this site as one of division, contention between cruisers and birdwatchers, and your approach to creating the work in response appears to have been one of care and gentleness, feeding birds, attracting hummingbirds, teaching a perv to eat honeysuckle, the love notes on the trees, etc. Can you speak to the approach as a response to a site of contention?
This is a really good question, actually. And this is something that I've been always like thinking about, how this site is like nurturing for different communities, and like for the plants, and like for the people, and like the gay community who is like otherwise marginalized. And this is why I decided to, and when I started taking photographs of these like tree carvings, I was like this is a very cliche image. So you see on the trees like M loves C or like something like that. But when you looked at them closer, you noticed some like nuances. That was when I like got really interested in it, and it seems like a violent act of like carving something on the tree's body, but it comes from love, and it doesn't hurt the tree like also. And also how like the site is also very welcoming to migrants as well. And this is when I discovered this when I took the photograph of the trunk that says I thought it was saying I. Then I looked at it and I thought like, who would write I on a tree? And then I realized, oh, actually it is E and E. And then when I looked closer, there was this like a crack on the trunk. It was E and F. So I really like this like idea of like how also tree participated. It was like almost a tree, so I'm like tree participated in this like relationship and like changed the letters. And it was also in Spanish. Yeah, I mean the whole idea of the exhibition is also like conviviality, how like both of these different communities can like enjoy this site together, because like it's happening. It's not always like birders hate cruisers. Like they're there. They still go, and like they're not so bothered with each other as well. So they don't care if they're like in the same site. And that is actually like very beautiful to see how like you don't have to create only modest environments.
Yeah, that was a great answer and a really good question, Chloe. Thank you. So I think we're about out of time, but thank you so much, Faysal, for making this wonderful work and letting us show it.
Thanks everybody for coming to watch it.
Yes. Yeah, and thanks to Nada as well for inviting us to do this program.
Thank you all. Thank you, Faysal and Jack and Tim. Yeah, this was great. Great way to see the exhibition for those who can't be there. And congrats on such a wonderful show. And I just want to thank everyone for coming as well, and invite you to, we have one more program tomorrow at 3 p.m. Chicago time at Goldfinch Gallery. It's a conversation with 3 of those artists. And hopefully, you can make it to that.
Great. Oh, one last note from us. We're going to be uploading a accessible version of Faysal's video to our website with closed captioning. So that will be there.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for joining in.